The media runs on a conflict narrative, which means the extremes get to control our public discourse, from the caves in Afghanistan to the fundamentalist backwaters of Florida, where we recently saw a pastor nobody had ever heard of threaten to burn Qurans on September 11th. This took place when we were already in the middle of a controversy where my friend Faisal Abdul Ruaf and Daisy Khan, his wife, their plans to open a peace center, a healing center, an intercultural center in New York City in Lower Manhattan had run into protest. Daisy told me a few months before that her biggest concern until the controversy was whether there'd be enough stroller space in the Interfaith Cultural Center. Well, that got very complicated, and they called me and said, what do we do with all this hostility being directed toward us when we wanted here to make a bridge, make a way to peace? In the middle of this pastor, Terry Jones, said he was going to burn Qurans. So right away, what I learned was the relationships between us across these faith lines quickly came into play. And so I want to tell you a very hopeful story. I think since 9/11, our relationships have deepened and strengthened, and those relationships helped to avert a tragedy on that day of 9/11. First of all, evangelical Christians, a tradition that Terry Jones claimed, wanted to surround Jones with first condemnation for his hateful rants and threatened actions, saying this was really a slap in the face of Jesus. Second, we wanted to support our friends, Faisal Ruaf and Daisy Khan. And so I remember when Terry Jones said he was going to go to New York City and confront the imam and negotiate. I won't burn Qurans if you don't build your Interfaith Cultural Center, which was an offensive moral equivalence. Here is an obscure pastor going to burn the holy book of a billion people, and a respected, courageous, heroic, in my mind, moderate Muslim leader trying to find a way to peace right there in Lower Manhattan. And so Daisy called and Faisal and said, what do we do? He's coming to town, going to confront us. What do we do? I remember it was a Friday, September 10th, and I was wondering what we could do as evangelicals to run interference for our friends and really head him off. He shouldn't be talking to Faisal Ruaf. He should be talking to us and be accountable for his activity. So right at that moment, sometimes the Lord provides. And so I get a call from Jeff Tunnicliffe. Jeff is the leader of the World Evangelical Alliance. He told me that he was in Lower Manhattan and he wanted to help. And he'd gotten the cell phone for Terry Jones. As I say, the Lord provides. He was there and he wanted to be of assistance. So I called Faisal and Daisy and said, trust him. He's a good man, and we'll head off Terry Jones. Sure enough, we put together a team of evangelicals to talk to Jones, who arrived, got it to a hotel in Queens, was going to walk to the mosque, and the police said, you're a threat to the city. We can't protect even your security. You better hide under your bed and go back to Florida. Well, he was terrified, and our team actually became supportive to him. He began to talk on a conference call because he wouldn't leave the whole hotel. They said he was lost, was way over his head. In the conversation, agreed that he wouldn't burn the Quran and went back to Florida. Now, I was on TV most every night, CNN, MSNBC, all the cables, trying to interpret this and say their conflict narrative wasn't working. So I challenged CNN to tell a different kind of story. All these stories across the country of Christians and Muslims and Jews finding collaboration. Finally, on Sunday morning, they went and got one of those stories. It was in Tennessee, a year and a half earlier. The Heart Song Church heard that an Islamic cultural center was coming to their neighborhood. So Pastor Steve Stone thought he would welcome them, because, as he told me, Jesus tells us to love our neighbors. So Heart Song put a sign on the front lawn. Heart Song Church welcomes the Islamic Cultural Center. The Muslims were floored. They didn't expect that kind of greeting, and they walked to the door of the church 2 days later and said, we were kind of hoping just to be ignored, and you're welcoming us. Why? Because, he said, Steve Stone, Jesus tells us to love our neighbors. And you're neighbors. Welcome to the neighborhood. So they began to talk, leaders and leaders, kids and kids, nothing like play dates to get your kids to know each other. And the pork barbecue began to include halal meat. And so barbecues took place. Ministry took place to homeless people, tutoring kids. Steve told me he didn't know much about Islam before this at all, but he was learning now, and he found it exciting, he told me. Well, this year, the Muslim neighbors went to the Christian neighbors and said, our center isn't finished yet. Could we celebrate Ramadan in your church, at least the first couple nights? A year and a half before, I'm sure the Christians would have said, what is Ramadan? But now they knew. So they welcomed them in. So here are church members, evangelicals, welcoming their Muslim neighbors, saying, welcome, we're glad you're here. Here's the place, here's the bathrooms, here's the coffee. Is coffee okay? They're all learning together. And CNN told their story and showed Steve and the leader of that community together as friends, and really showing now their respect and love for each other. And then Steve called me and said he needed to tell me a story. 3 days later, he got a call from Pakistan, from Kashmir in Pakistan, where a room full of Muslim men had gathered at 1:30 a.m. to call this pastor. They said, is this Pastor Stone? He said, yes, it is. We're calling from Pakistan. We're all in a room together. We wanted to tell you how we felt about that story we saw on CNN. We were watching it together, and when it was finished, we were all silent because we were stunned. And then one of us said, I think God may be speaking to us through this man. Another one said, how can we kill these people? Then one of us, he doesn't speak English, or he'd tell you, but he went out and with his own hands, he cleaned inside and outside the little church close to where we live. And now we're all gathered here just to call you and to tell you that we don't hate you, but we love you, and we're going to try and be good neighbors now too, like you have been. So we're going to promise you that we're going to look after that little church near us for the rest of our lives. That story is our future, and we have to pay attention.